from Sheila Peltz Weinberg. Who is beseeching heaven? Who is crying out, Avinu Malkeinu? Who is confessing their emptiness? Whose deeds just don't measure up? Who is logging their great list of needs? To be heard, to be filled, to be held, forgiven, remembered, answered, healed, protected. Who? You and me. Jews in high-ceiling temples and in your house. Settlers in Ariel and Hebron. Pregnant Jewish women. Recent converts. Gay and trans Jews. Hungry Jews. Black and brown Jews. Old, tired, and sick Jews. Teenagers and bored Jews. Crying and laughing Jews. Jewish soldiers. Jewish generals and judges. Jews in prison. Married Jews. Divorced. Single. Widowed Jews. Jews in power. Jewish Republicans and Jewish Democrats and Jewish Greens. Zionists, non-Zionists, anti-Zionists, post-Zionists, in coats and white kittles, in Nikes and leather high heels, at the wall, in the hall, at your house. Everyone. Avinu Malkeinu, we are all empty. You are full. Fill us with justice. Fill us with love. Help us. On page 1 in your Mahzor, we can't hear you here in the sanctuary, but we can feel you. We can feel the presence, even though we stand in front of empty chairs. We feel the connection right at our hearts, right in our kishkas, between us, between everyone in this congregation. We always know, wherever we are, on Kol Nidre we come together for renewal, for rebirth. Bottom of page 1, please join me in the English. Ribono shel olam, holiness of the entire world, I now forgive and pardon anyone who has angered or troubled me or has injured me, physically or financially, in my self-esteem or in any other way. Whether the injury was accidental or intentional, by speech or by deed, in this incarnation or in any other. May no one be punished on my account. May it be that I move past my mistakes and not repeat them. May all the misdeeds I have committed be transformed through endless compassion without further harm or suffering. May the words I speak and my deepest thoughts befit your love for me, my rock, my liberation. We return as a community, wherever we are, top of page 2.
Return to the source of it all. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are born and reborn again. Return again. Return again. Return to the land of your soul.
On page 4, you'll find our Kol Nidre prayers. To have the honor of holding a Sefer Torah, a Torah scroll, is an incredible honor on Kol Nidre. And we reserve it for the greatest leaders, the most tireless volunteers, the people who have done so much given of their time and talent for this community. Obviously, we can't have people holding Torah scrolls right now, for the most part. And who are our heroes then? Who are the people who deserve honor? We're going to hold Torah scrolls. Torah is about teaching, it is about learning, it is about continuing the chain of tradition. And so, we can't see you here, but on Zoom, I think you can be seen. If you are an educator, and that is an educator in any way, whether you're a classroom teacher or right now a remote teacher, or you're a Hebrew school teacher, or you're a driving teacher, or if you're a guitar teacher, if you a tutor, anything, if you a speech pathologist, if you provide support in any way to allow education to happen, you are our heroes. And so we invite you to rise. If you're willing to put in the chat where you do what you do. So what your role is and what institution you work at, or maybe you're just an independent tutor. And for the rest of us, if there's a teacher that you have in your life who has been particularly instrumental, could be right now, could be in the past, could be alive or dead, I invite you to write the name of that teacher in the chat box as well. Or Zaru ala tzadik ul yishrei lev simcha. Light is sown for the righteous, and joy for the steadfast in heart. People who bring joy and righteousness to the classroom that is this world. We're going to open the ark. I invite you to rise in body or spirit, in addition, along with, rather, the teachers who have already risen. And I am grateful that Ilan is here, who's going to help me hold at least a couple of Sifrei Torah. So as we open the ark, I invite Ilan to come on up. We continue as the choir leads us in the singing of Or Zarua. Top of page 4.
Vishiva Shemala, Uvishiva Shemata, Aldat Hamakom, Viadat Hakahal, Anu Matirin, Lehit Palelim Ha'avaryanim.
In the heavenly yeshiva and in the earthly yeshiva, before the omnipresent and before this congregation, we grant permission to pray with everyone who has transgressed.
Vishiva Shemala, Uvishiva Shemala,
in the heavenly yeshiva and in the earthly yeshiva. Before the omnipresent and before this congregation, we grant permission to pray with everyone who has transgressed.
בישיבה של מעלה ובישיבה של מטה, על דעת המקום ועל דעת הקהל, אנו מתירים להתפלל עם העבריינים.
In the heavenly yeshiva and in the earthly yeshiva, before the omnipresent and before this congregation, we grant permission to pray with everyone who has transgressed. Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the universe, we had no idea when we stood here 1 year ago on Kol Nidre of 5780 that this year would have in store for us what it has. We have made commitments. We have made pledges. We have said we would do things that because of time and circumstance, we have been unable to fulfill. Please know, the people of this community have done the best they could. You know how weak we can be. Please give us the strength to start anew. Please give us the strength, despite all that we have pledged and all that we have failed to do, to love who you have made us, and let us be reborn.
Kol Nidre v'sarei v'charamei v'konamei v'chinuyei v'kinusei u'shavuot din darna u'deish tavana u'de'acharimna v'diyasaynal nafshatana miyom kippurim zeh ad yom kippurim haba aleinu litova kulon nicharat navehon kol hon yehon sharam shvikin shvitin betelin umvutalin la shiririn vela kayamin nidrana la nidre vesarana la esare u'shavuatana la shivuot. Kol Nidre v'sarei v'charamei v'konamei שוויקים שוויתים בתהילין ובתהילין לשרירין ולקיימין נדרנן לה נדרה וסרנה לה אסרי ושבועתנה לשבועות. Kol Nidre v'sarei v'charamei v'konamei v'chinuyei v'kinusei u'shvuot din darna udishtavana udeacharimna nafshatana miyom kippurim zad yom kippurim haba leidu litova kolon nicharat navehon kolon yeon sharan shvikin shvitin בתהילין ובתהילין לשרירין ולקיימין נדרנה לה נדרה וסרנה לה אסרי ושבועתנה לשבועות.
All the weight of everything that we vowed, excluded, failed, promised ourselves, swore we would, swore we wouldn't, cut ourselves off from last Yom Kippur to the one that will come next year. May it be for the good. All of them. We free ourselves from them. From this moment, they are nothing. Our enmities, our limitations, our blame, they have no reality. They no longer exist. These vows were never vows. These oaths are not valid oaths. These bindings are released.
ונסלח לכל הדת בני ישראל ולגר הגר בתוכם כי לכל העם בשגגה ונסלח לכל הדת בני ישראל ולגר הגר בתוכם כי לכל העם בשגגה בני ישראל ולגר הגר בתוכם כי לכל העם בשגגה.
Grant forgiveness to all the people of Israel and to those who live among them, for all the people have made mistakes. And God said, I have forgiven, as you have spoken. Adonai, salachti kidvarecha.
Vayomer
Adonai,
salachti kidvarecha. Vayomer Adonai salachti kidvarecha.
So take this moment, take a deep breath. This is the feeling of weight being lifted. This is the feeling of having a clean slate. Knowing that for anything between us and God, Yom Kippur frees us. We are also liberated, if we haven't done it already, to step forward into the possibility of new relationships within ourselves, between us and the people we love, between us and the world. If that isn't a Shehechianu moment, I don't know what is. And so we take a moment in this beautiful newness, in the joy of possibility, to say the Shehechianu on the bottom of page 4.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh.
And all you have to do to make it so is say Amen.
Amen.
Perfect. We did it. The ark is closed. We remain standing. The Baruch Hu is on page 5. Yasher Koach. Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Vaed.
Please be seated. Continue on the top of page 6. Blessed is the causer of causes, majestic pattern of the universe, whose design brings on the evening, through insight, always unlocking the gates of time, and through understanding, repeating and varying the cycles of seasons, setting the pathways of the stars and planets in space according to design, even when this world seems unpredictable, reliably conceiving day and night, rolling away light from the face of darkness and darkness from the face of light, closing the day, bringing on the night, marshaling the cosmic forces. That is your nature. May your living presence be our amazement forever. Blessed are you who brings on the night.
ומעביר יום ומבדיל לילה ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה אדוני צבאות שמו אל חי וקיים תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני המרי ורבי.
Page 6, Ahavat Olam, is going to lead right into the Shema, and we are super excited that the Rosenman family is going to lead us in the Shema. But first, Ahavat Olam, the expansive, infinite, really, really big love that's throughout this universe, expressed in Ahavat Olam by teaching, that God loves us enough to teach us Torah and to give us pathways to learning. And so, because we've honored teachers tonight, is there some sort of love that you have received through a lesson that you've learned? This might be a little complicated to put in the chat, but, you know, anything is possible on Kol Nidre. All things can start over. So if you've got a life lesson, I'll tell you, I used to work for a roofing company, Hayden Building Maintenance, in Valley Cottage, I think, in New York. And the lesson I learned, never walk backwards on a roof. That is really good advice.
That is very useful.
It's useful, right? So I invite you, if there's some life lesson, that was from Greg Hayden, the owner of Hayden Building Maintenance. So if you've got something that you want to put in, a life lesson, big or small, I invite you to put that in the chat as the cantor leads us in Ahavat Olam. Again, leading into the Rosenman family, leading us in Shema. Baruch Shem Kavod, by the way, is going to be said out loud. It's exciting. Everything's exciting on Kol Nidre. So much is happening. So we'll invite them to lead us when we get there. Page 6.
We're in the last 3 lines. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו ובהם נגע יומם ולילה ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל.
הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשבתך ובקומך וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך.
Wow. You can be seated if you were standing. This is called Feynman's Formula. It's from Bob Grapple, our own Bob, who is in our choir, is a poet. He says, teach it to a child. The Bible relates, you shall teach these words diligently to your children. It's not only the children that do the learning. The teacher gains as much from replying to the questions as the student gleans from the answers. And there'll be many more than just the Seder's set of 4. Don't blindly recite the words and follow the forms. These are just the names of the things you'll want to learn. 2, review. What seemed true to a teenage bar mitzvah student appears far differently to a 30-something with children of his own. My grandparents experienced an alternate reality from mine. What seemed clear in a Middle Ages European ghetto might be viewed quite differently in today's global village. We must seek the constants that do not change. We should strive to fill the gaps in our knowledge. True competence comes from knowing the limits of our abilities. 3, organize and simplify. Every year or so, review your notes. Read them out loud. If it doesn't sound convincing to you, if the story doesn't quite ring true, maybe your understanding still needs some work. The Bible stories and the histories need further clarification and elaboration as each year we come to them with new minds and new hearts. And finally, 4, transmit. The Torah goes on to say, you shall speak of these words at home and away, morning and evening. The ultimate test of one's knowledge lies in the capacity to convey it to another. We're all children in one subject or another, each capable of teaching and desirous of learning. Page 8.
Adonai Elohechem Emet.
It is true that there is a unity to reality. There is nothing which is not holy. It is true that remembering that unity frees us from the strength of terror and redeems us from the grasp of violence. There is help to face the pharaohs in our lives and to confront the source of their violence. There is help to transcend our afflictions and rise above our fears. There is help to transform our angers and hatreds and emerge in total freedom. When the Israelites saw the miracle of their liberation and saw this possibility, they burst out in song and praise. Moses laughed, Miriam danced, and all the people together responded with joy this liberation song on the bottom of page 8.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nadar b'kodesh, no rati lo tosef utecha ra'u v'anecha b'ki ayam lifnei Moshe Zeili anu v'yomeru Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed V'nemar ki fada Adonai et Yaakov ugelo miyad chazak mimenu le'olamim Baruch atah Adonai Gal Yisrael.
Amen. Continue. Hashkivenu. In a world in which it's hard to know what's coming in next. A prayer for God to spread upon us a Sukkot Shlomecha, a sukkah of peace.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu L'shalom.
Lay us down tonight in peace.
Mehamidenu
And awaken us
Malkeinu
to full life.
L'chaim tovim u'shalom.
Spread the shelter of your peace over us.
U'firos aleinu
Enlighten us
Sukkot
from the
Shlomecha.
burdens of hatred,
V'takninu
war,
b'tzat tovam
sickness,
milfanecha.
famine, and sadness.
Carry
Carry us in the shadow of your wings. Watch watch over us. Guard our going out and our returning in life and in peace. Tonight and always. Spread the sukkah of shalom over us. Spread the sukkah of your peace over us. Over all Israel. Over all who dwell on earth. Over your holy city, Jerusalem. Shemo.
Hapores sukat shalom aleinu v'al kol amo Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'al Yerushalayim.
On this day, atonement will be made for you to transform all your shortcomings. Before the infinite, you shall be clean.
כי ביום הזה יכפר עליכם לטהר אתכם מכל חטאותיכם לפני אדוני תטהרו.
Continue with the Chatzi Kaddish as we rise in body or spirit. That will lead into the Amidah, just said in the evening silently. You'll find it in the Hebrew on pages 11 through 13, in the English on pages 14 and 15. That's a more or less direct translation. And there are alternate Amidah readings on pages 16 and 17. This is a time, Kol Nidre, we get real. We start to tell ourselves the truth and tell God the truth about who we are and what we've been. This is a time of silence and a time of introspection. It's a time to face who we have been and who we can be. Again, we rise in body or spirit, page 10, the Chatzi Kaddish, into the selections that I mentioned. For the Amidah, you'll let us know that you've gotten to the end of your Amidah by being seated.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה וילמד יברח חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשה
Barichu.
בריחו לילה ולילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בימה ויאמרו אמן.
May our hearts reach up at evening, our cries come at morning, our joyful shouts appear at evening. May our search go up at evening, our response come at morning, our atonement appear at evening. May the angel who redeemed me from all that was corrupt bring blessings upon the children. May they reflect the beauty of the holy name. Be blessed in the city, be blessed in the country. Blessed as you arrive, blessed as you are leaving, blessed by the works you've accomplished. May God open for you treasures of heavenly goodness. May you have good credit and not need it. May you not ever have to feel shame or blame. Go in joy, arrive in peace. Mountains and hills sing you on your way. Draw waters of joy from the fountain of help. May you live to the day that God be so present, the way that we hoped to be present to us, in us, all along, a real help in our lives. How we will celebrate then. So you say to each other, L'chaim. To you, shalom. To your home, shalom. All of yours. Shalom. Continue on the top of page 20.
Adonai, Adonai, Rachum v'chanun, Erech apayim v'rav chesed v'yemet, Notze chesed la'alafim, Notze avon v'fesha, B'chata v'na'akim.
Adonai, Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, compassion and tenderness, patience, forbearance, kindness, awareness, bearing love from age to age, lifting guilt and mistakes, making us free.
וסלחת לעווננו ולחטאתנו ונשחטנו, סלח לנו אבינו כי חטאנו, מחל לנו מכנו כי פשענו, כי אתה אדוני טוב וסלח, כי אתה אדוני טוב וסלח, ורב חסד לכל קוראיך, ורב חסד לכל קוראיך.
Continuing in the middle of page 20.
שמע קולנו, אדוני אלוהינו, חוס ורחם עלינו, וקבל ברחמים וברצון את תפילתנו.
Hear our voices. Awake all mercies. Accept our prayer from where we are now.
אל תשליכנו מלפניך, ורוח קודשך אל תרחק ממנו.
Do not send us away from your presence. Keep us from losing sight of your Spirit.
אל תשליכנו לעת זקנה, כי כלות כוחנו, אל תעזבנו.
as we grow older, don't abandon us. Stay close when we are weak.
השיבנו אדוני אליך, השיבנו אליך ונשובה, חדש ימינו, ימינו, כקדם.
In a moment, we'll invite you to rise. We just said, turn us toward you so we may return. May all our days be new again. And this is our first vidui, our first confession as a community for Yom Kippur. There's a practice of tapping your chest while you do this. And again, some of us grew up with this being a little bit of a punishment. You're kind of hurting yourself a little bit. Oy, oy, oy. But I like to think of it in a few different ways. One of them is maybe just knocking on the door of your heart, seeing if anybody's home. It could be that you've forgotten that something lives in there. We rise in body or spirit as we confess as a community and become responsible for one another. Acknowledge that we're responsible for one another. And knock on our hearts and say, it's okay to come out. Page 21, we rise.
Ay, 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 Ashanu, Baganu, Gazalnu, Dibarnu Dafi, Havinu, Lishanu, Zadnu, Chamasnu, Tafanu Sheker, ay, 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 Yatsnura, Kizavnu, Latsnu, Maranu, Niyatsnu, Saranu, Avinu, Pashanu, Sararnu, Kishinu Aref. Ay, 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 Rashanu, Shichatnu, Tiyavnu, Tainu, Titanu.
Please be seated. Continue, page 22, our vidui for the individual sins that we've committed, for which all of us are responsible as a community together. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha, for our fault in accustoming ourselves to negative patterns.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha, and for our fault in being judgmental.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha, for our fault in confusing love and lust.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha, and for our fault in not taking care of our bodies.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha, for our fault in remembering prices, but for forgetting values.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha, and for our fault in failing to maintain appropriate limits.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha, for our fault in desacralizing the sacred.
And for our fault in keeping relationships superficial.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha, for our fault of arrogance and vanity.
And for our fault in being unforgiving.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha, for our fault in letting our hearts and minds split off.
And for our fault in hiding from life behind mistrust. V'ya kulam Eloah selichot, selach lanu mecha lanu kaper lanu.
For each of these misdeeds, we seek this day release, forgiving and forgetting, coming back now to our core. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha, for our fault in delaying critical decisions, and for our fault in ignoring our own power, for our fault in denying our flaws, and for our fault in being overly defensive, for our fault in despairing, and for our fault by frivolity at dreadful times, for our fault in constant complaining and kvetching, and for our fault in being unappreciative, for our fault through lack of courage, and for our fault through loss of faith, for our fault in doubting our ability to give and receive love, and for our fault in insisting that everything we do have a payoff. We continue as the choir leads us the bottom of page 22. We continue. Kihine Kachomer, the bottom of page 24.
Ki hine kachomer b'yad hayotzer, b'ritzoto machiv u'b'ritzoto mekatzer. Ki anachnu b'yadcha, chesed notzer. La brita beit, li'ol tifen la yetzer.
We are as clay in potter's hand. She does contract, she does expand, so we are yours. Help shape our will. We yield to you, our passions still. As glass is shaped by blower's pipe and vessels made of every type, so shape our deeds. We may contain, we yield to you. In us, remain. As weavers' hands join thread to thread, each strand to all the others wed in tapestry of glowing delight, we yield to you. Let us shine your light. Kianu Amecha, because we are your people. Page 25.
Kianu amecha v'yata Eloheinu, anu vanecha v'yata
ואתה אדוננו, אנו כאוהליך, ואתה חלקנו, אנו נחלתך, ואתה גורלנו, אנו צאנך, ואתה רוענו, אנו כרמך, ואתה נוטרנו, אנו פעולתך, ואתה יוצרנו, אנו רעייתך, ואתה דודנו, אנו סגולתך, ואתה קרובנו, אנו עמך, ואתה מלכנו, אנו מאמירך, ואתה מאמירנו. Because we are your people and you are our guide. We your children and you our parent. We are your helpers and you are inspiration. We your family and you our portion. We are your legacy and you our destiny. We your flock and you our shepherd. Oh, please don't turn from us in anger. You are our helper. Even if father and mother forsake us, you will take us in. Show us what we need to do, because there is danger all around us. If we ever stop believing that we could see the good in life, await God, be strong, take heart, await God. We turn to the middle of page 26. We rise in body or spirit as the ark is open for Avinu Malkeinu. Avinu Malkeinu, we have made mistakes. Our mother, our ruler, we have no ruler but you. Our father, our nurturer, bless a good year for us. Write us in the book of life. Write us in the book of help and salvation. Write us in the book of livelihood and sustenance. Write us in the book of decency and compassion. Write us in the book of forgiveness and new hopes. Raise the horn of the Messiah time. Hear our voice. Have compassion on us. Open the gates of heaven to our prayers. We continue as the choir leads us, the top of page 27.
Amen.
Avinu Malkeinu, open our ears to the voice that tells us to help heal this world with our deeds, to strive as hard as we can through lives of compassion and love, to work with you to make a path for justice and peace. That glory shine forth in this world. Please be seated. We throw it over live on location to Joe Formaggio, the Formaggi house. We first learned about COVID in February, I guess. We learned that it was becoming really dangerous because it was spreading through Italy. And it seemed far away at that point. But the rabbis of Italy, the Rabbinical Association of Italy, composed a prayer on behalf of those who were suffering from COVID and communities who were faced with the prospect that life as they had known it was becoming very different. I was moved by that prayer in February, and I'm even more moved by it now, and I am grateful that we have, first of all, a couple of people who have made these high holidays. There's a lot of people who we have to thank along the way. Joe and Jamie Formaggio have been tireless and incredibly, I can't even come up with the words, just so detail-oriented, so organized, so responsive, so persistent, and so much of what you're seeing here has to do with them, their organization. So it's a real honor to invite Joe to share in Italian and in English the Italian Rabbinical Association prayer on behalf of COVID.
In ogni creatura. Sazia il mondo intero con la tua bontà e riempi le nostre mani delle tue benedizioni e la ricchezza dei doni che giungono dalle tue mani. Protegge e salva tutte le tue creature da ogni male, da ogni sorta di distruzione e da ogni calamità. Concede a noi una buona speranza e un futuro di pace. Abbi compassione e dona guarigione ad ogni persona, poiché tu sei buono e benefico verso chiunque e ascolti la preghiera che giunge da noi da ogni bocca. Benedetto sei tu che ascolti la preghiera. O Lord, our God, the God of our fathers, God of every creature, fill the world entirely of your bounty, and fill our hands of your benedictions and of the richness that you give to us from your hands. Protect and save all of your creatures from every evil, from all sorts of destruction, and every calamity. Concede to us good fortune and a future of peace. Have compassion and give us healing to each person, because in you is healing and goodness, and you who hear our prayer that comes from every mouth. Blessed is you who hear our prayer.
Amen, amen. Yasher koach. Thank you, Joe. In a time where we ask for rescue from calamity, in a time of uncured disease, in a time when healing is so needed, I invite you to turn to page 27. Our Mishaberach prayer will be on the bottom of page 27, in the middle and on the bottom. I invite you, as you think of anyone in your world who is in need of healing, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual, type their name into the chat box. Remember that even when cures are not available, healing has universal power. It can reach deep into our souls. It can help us transition from where we are to where we need to be. It is always available in some form. Mishaberach, middle of page 27 toward the bottom.
Mishaberach Avotenu Mikor HaBaracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishaberach Imotenu Mikor HaBaracha Lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah Shema, the renewal of body, renewal of spirit, and to let us say, Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai, Rofeh HaCholim. Blessed are you, Adonai, the healer of all who are sick. We say Amen.
Amen.
(1848), October. The cholera epidemic has hit Vilna, and the Salanta Rebbe is worried. Vilna's prominence as a center of Jewish learning in Lithuania is known throughout the Jewish world. So much that Vilna has come to be known as the Jerusalem of Lithuania. And yet, here in the epicenter of Jewish wisdom, the Salanta Rebbe is worried. He is not at any rabbinic court. He has no formal position in this Jerusalem of Vilna, Jerusalem of Lithuania. What he does have is a reputation as an ethical leader, a scrupulous teacher of principle. The Salanter's innovation is his integration of study and prayer with a new and passionate form of focus on values called musar, personal reflection and ethical development. But as the Yom Kippur of 1848 approaches, the cholera epidemic is worsening. At great personal expense, the Salanter rents a 500-bed hospital to take care of the sick. He convinces doctors to treat them at no charge. Nevertheless, the Salanter's concern for his people is only growing. Like any good rabbi, sure, he's concerned for their spiritual and ethical health, but he remains concerned for their physical health. Concerned that fasting will make the currently healthy more vulnerable to the deadly virus. And he is concerned that his fellow rabbis are timid and indecisive in the face of this crisis. He knows he has a choice to make. And so, as the Yom Kippur morning service draws to a close, the Salanter rises to speak In the words of one eyewitness, his weak voice grows stronger and higher every minute, and at last it is quite loud. He speaks of the sanctity of the Day of Atonement and of the Holy Torah, of repentance, of prayer, of the living and of the dead, and of the pestilence that has broken out, that destroys without pity, without rest, without a pause. For how long? He asks. For how much longer? He continues, when trouble comes to a person, they must look to their deeds. But he says not just ritual deeds. The Salanter reminds his community that keeping themselves healthy is a religious obligation. We must act, he says, in accordance with the wise doctor's instructions. He insists this is so because our religion tells us to walk by the light of the doctor's words. His stunned community listening in silence, the Salanter concludes, there are times when one must turn aside from the law, if by so doing a whole community may be saved. And thus, with the consent of the all-present, with the consent of this congregation, he declares, we give leave to eat and drink on the Day of Atonement. The most important mitzvah to teach on that Yom Kippur in Vilna comes at the expense of the best-known obligation of Yom Kippur, rejecting fasting to safeguard life. The lives of individuals, the life of a community. The year 70 of the Common Era, the Roman siege of Jerusalem is becoming intolerable, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is worried. It's been 3 years since the general Vespasian laid siege to Jerusalem. Ever since, the city's Jews have been subject to deprivation and degradation. Yochanan's neighbors, the Biryonim, the Jewish zealots, are itching for war with the Romans. Their rage is so intense that it often flares up against fellow Jews. Some people call them Sicarii, daggermen, due to their tendency to mix in with Jewish crowds, sinking daggers into the flesh of Jews they designate as collaborators. The Jews of Jerusalem cope as best they can. The Talmud explains that the 3 richest men of Jerusalem respond to the crisis of this siege by donating granaries of wheat and barley, storerooms of wine and salt, oil, firewood, enough provisions to maintain the city for 21 years. The zealots, though, are so bent on making war that they burn down the storehouses of grain, determined to hasten the revolt. And thus, the siege turns quickly to famine. Yochanan sees the clear and ugly truth. These zealots, saturated with rage, will cut down their own people in the pursuit of war. He knows he has a choice to make. Feigning illness, Yochanan tells his disciples, Eliezer and Joshua, to put him inside of a coffin. Bluffing their way past Roman guards, Eliezer and Joshua take the coffin straight to Vespasian, the general. Despite Vespasian's protestations, Rabbi Yochanan boldly addresses him as Malcha, Aramaic for king. Yochanan predicts that as Roman emperor, the general will capture and defeat Jerusalem. And as they stand there arguing about the matter, a messenger arrives from Rome with an announcement for Vespasian. Rise, for the emperor has died. And the noblemen of Rome plan to appoint you, Vespasian, as their ruler. In flabbergasted appreciation, Vespasian asks what he can do to express his gratitude to this Jew, to Rabbi Yochanan. Yochanan knows that Jerusalem is to be destroyed. From the outside by these Romans, and from the inside by the rage of the Jewish zealots. There are times when one must turn aside from the known, if in turning to the unknown a whole community can be saved. Yochanan has already experienced death, the death of his community, and a metaphorical death, leaving his beloved Jerusalem sealed in a coffin. He He knows the revival of Judaism will not be in the temple in Jerusalem, but in rabbinic academies throughout the land, like in the coastal town of Yavne. And so Rabbi Yochanan responds to Vespasian's offer simply, give me Yavne and its sages. This decision by Rabbi Yochanan ensures that the modes of Jewish learning and living that will safeguard Jewish community for the next 2,000 years can live on. His decision, letting go of Jerusalem, allows the Jewish people to reinvent themselves in interpretation and innovation, discussion and debate, like the one preserved in the very Talmud where we find this story. Over 3,000 years ago, a new Pharaoh has risen over Egypt, and Yocheved is worried. Pharaoh's demagoguery, stirring up hate of the Hebrews in the Egyptian countryside, has led to a monstrous decree. All Hebrew boy babies are to be drowned in the Nile. The pregnant Yocheved would ordinarily be overjoyed to birth a son. But she knows that in Pharaoh's Egypt, gender is a death sentence. But babies have little regard for decrees from pharaohs or anyone else. And so the baby Moses is born. Mother and child last 3 months hiding Moses from the Egyptian death machine. But such efforts can succeed for only so long. The Midrash tells us that the Egypt of this new king has become so ruthless that, quote, anywhere that Egyptians heard a baby was born, they would bring another baby there in order that it could be heard crying, which would make other babies cry. And then Pharaoh's secret police would thus discover the hidden Hebrew babies and murder them. 3 months of nurturing and nursing this baby boy have brought Yocheved unimagined joy. But she knows what she has to do. She makes an impossibly small ark out of the softest reeds she can find. Like you and I might frost a birthday cake. She spreads mushy red mud on the inside and waterproof but pliant pitch on the outside, doing her best to ensure that the ark won't rupture if it bumps into hard rocks or branches. According to the Talmudic account, inside Moses' basket, Yocheved even builds a tiny chuppah, saying to herself, Shema lo eske lechupato. Maybe I won't be worthy of being present at his wedding chuppah. And with daughter Miriam looking on from afar, Yocheved places her boy in the willows down by the riverbank, somehow finding the strength to let go. It is downriver, a short distance geographically, but worlds away, that Pharaoh's daughter is bathing in the water. She sees a most peculiar sight, a tiny floating basket. Looking into the basket, she knows immediately. This is one of the Hebrew boys. Defying decrees of both family and state, Pharaoh's daughter reaches into the water, reaches into herself, and saves Moses. If not for Pharaoh's daughter, if not for Yocheved before her, we would not be here to observe Yom Kippur. Our observance of Yom Kippur is unlike any other Yom Kippur observance in our memory. It is the first time I've ever given a Yom Kippur sermon into a camera under some hot lights. You'll forgive me for schwitzing. It is the first Yom Kippur that our community has not observed in person. We do so because of what might befall us if we did otherwise. The threat of COVID is real and it is fatal. It is why you're seeing pixelated versions of yourselves via this screen rather than looking at each other directly in the eyes. It is what we have to do. Of course, it is not what we had hoped for. For us, it is unprecedented. But for the Jewish people, facing crisis and calamity is far from unprecedented. Yocheved faces the inconceivable murder of her baby. Rabbi Yochanan faces the unthinkable obliteration of Jerusalem. and the Salanter Rebbe faces the insidious plague of cholera. Each had a choice to make. And because of the choices they made, we are indebted to all of them. I mentioned on Rosh Hashanah that all my drashot, these high holidays, will be connected in some way to the theme of Jewish choice. Every single moment, wherever we are, is an opportunity to make a Jewish choice. No matter the circumstance, at work, at home, at the courtroom, at the coffee house, at the bank or the boardroom, in the bedroom, Jewish text, tradition, and history offer opportunities to see our Jewishness not as a set of occasional rituals, but as a way to consider the choices available to us in every single moment, and to navigate a life that supports and sustains us accordingly. The phrase Jewish choice might imply that there are clear right and wrong paths to walk as Jews. Whether a Jewish choice is right or wrong is sometimes far from clear. One of the reasons I think that Jews are known for talking so much is because we talk our way through considering different paths, like in the Talmud. And after all the talking, we may not all make the same choices. In fact, odds are we won't. And yet, Jews of all types are unified by one value that transcends generations, denominations. It is our regard and reverence for life. This bedrock principle of Jewish choice reaches throughout generations of Jewish community. It reaches back to Torah, where at the Torah's end we find the dying Moses having led his people out of slavery, having brought down Torah from Sinai, having been saved from Pharaoh's death factory by his mother Yocheved, saved from the grip of the Nile's waters by Pharaoh's daughter, teaching his people a simple mitzvah. Uvacharta v'chayim. Choose life. Laman tichiyeh ata v'zarecha. Choose life so you live, you and your offspring. This reverence for life reaches back to the Jerusalem of Roman occupation, where we find the sage Yochanan ben Zakkai rejecting and refusing the zealots' thirst for vengeance, instead choosing, even at the expense of Jewish rule, in our beloved Jerusalem, the renewal of the Jewish people, in Yavne, life in rabbinic academies, both in and outside the land of Israel. This veneration for life reaches back to 19th century Vilna, where we find the Salanter Rebbe publicly defying the other rabbis of his community, teaching, we don't fast. We cannot fast if it puts the life of the community at risk. Now, this principle of placing a primacy on human life might seem obvious. And yet, a cursory look at the news and maybe a look outside of your window might suggest otherwise. As I first sat down to write this, we were approaching the anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. But there was no doubt in my mind that by the time I delivered it tonight, we would have reached 200,000 deaths due to COVID. In 8 months, the equivalent of more than 67 9/11s. 67. And as shocking as that number is, perhaps more shocking is that we're getting used to it. Such that as the months stretch on, as we become inured to the growing body count, we become tempted to ease up on the restrictions that lower the risk posed by exposure to COVID, the risk that we will catch it, or the risk that we'll spread it. As exhausting as it is to maintain distance, as sad as it is to stay away from the gathering, to wear masks wherever we go, to use the crazy one-way aisles in the supermarket, as cold weather makes its way back to the Northeast, it's going to be harder to gather outside. We'll find ourselves increasingly isolated. And we have to remind ourselves what the Salanter Rebbe knew, what Rabbi Yochanan chose, what Yocheved and Pharaoh's daughter insisted. We have to remember what Moses himself said, Uvacharta b'chayim, choose life. We are in the first days of the Jewish year, the season of teshuvah. We often translate teshuvah as repentance, but it literally means return. It's what we do when we've lost our way. We go back. When a person loses their way from God, when two people lose their way from each other, when a society has lost its way, when COVID deaths become normal, when mass shootings, which once shocked the conscience, now barely mention a headline, when deaths of immigrants in detention sometimes don't even achieve that, when citizens dying of hunger and abuse in the richest country in the world never even cross our radar, it's clear we've lost our way. And it's also clear we need to make our way back, to make tshuva, to return to our core values, to our core truth that every life is sacred. In a corrupted empire that treats human life as expendable, led by those who would choose to score political points at the expense of public safety, we need to keep choosing otherwise. We need to keep making a Jewish choice. I'm not the first rabbi to talk about Jewish choices. It's obvious to us that we will respond in particular ways to particular events, writes 20th century Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler. The decisions we make in the course of our normal lives, the choices we face, in Dessler's words, are within our territory. There are other choices, the rabbi continues, we have never had to make, and likely will never have to make. They are beyond the realm of our experience. They are firmly out of our territory. The place where these two areas meet, teaches Dessler, is what he calls a nikudat bechira, a choice point on the spectrum of what we know to be ethical and what we know to be unethical. That is the choice point. The struggle Dessler so elegantly describes is an internal one. And thus, the high holidays spur us to keep looking inward, checking and rechecking the landscape of our choices. What have I done this year? What did I do last year and the year before? And how am I growing? But sometimes, events conspire to move the front line of these choice points in ways that Dessler, I'm not sure, could imagine. Sometimes a cholera epidemic comes to your city. Sometimes zealots plunge daggers into your Jewish neighbors. Sometimes a pharaoh comes to power and brings mass death to the countryside. Sometimes a virus infects millions of global citizens, and sometimes our leaders lie about it. It is in times like these that the choice is brought to us. We stumble through this crisis in a country without a consistent and coordinated system to test for COVID, to trace who has come in contact with people who have tested positive, a country that's neglected to articulate the most basic appropriate treatment or prevention strategies. Public health agencies are politicized. Information is inconsistent. Testing rates fluctuate. The turnaround time for results is unpredictable at best. And in the absence of national and state leadership, decisions devolve. They fall upon cities, and then individual businesses and schools and synagogues, and they fall on you and me. The burden is so heavy. It's exhausting. Sometimes it brings out the best in us and sometimes the worst in us. And I have been so concerned about what it means for our community that I have lost my temper, and I have found myself speaking in ways that I'm not proud of, and for that I apologize to everyone I've spoken to in such a way. We've been put in this position, and it shouldn't be like this. Sometimes it just feels like it's everyone for themselves. But in these days of decision, we're not alone. We have to make these choices, and it's scary. But we're accompanied by the choices made by our ancestors. As we walk through this unprecedented world, the Salanta Rebbe stands behind us, his attenuated voice holding firm against a tide of timidity. Yochanan ben Zakkai journeys beside us, supine in his coffin, placing himself in a position of essential vulnerability, committing himself to the rebirth of his people at Yavna and beyond. Yocheved walks in front of us, taking the ultimate leap of faith, placing her baby in the water. And Pharaoh's daughter sustains us, standing at the edge of that water, eyes overflowing with love for a baby she's been taught to hate, defying a corrupted empire of death, Jews and non-Jews choosing life. These days, and in days to come, we each will be called to make that choice. Every moment, over and over. Please choose life, physical safety. For those who are isolated, reach out to them. If you're feeling isolated, reach out to someone else. We need to choose life as a Jewish community, as Jewish individuals, because our land needs it, because the world needs it, as our ancestors did before us. Uvacharta v'chayim. Let us choose life, that we and our children may live. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May it be God's will.
Ken Yehi Ratzon.
Aleinu l'shabeach. It's upon us to praise the source of life. We turn to page 28. Rise in body or spirit.
Aleinu l'shabeach
L'Adon
HaKol,
Latet gedula liotzer Breshit, Shelo asanu kigoyei haratzot, Velo samanu kemishpachot ha'adama, Shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, V'goraleinu kechol hamonam, V'anachnu korim umishtachavim umodim Lifnei melech malchei hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We honor, thank, and pledge ourselves to the blessed holiness that spreads out the heavens, whose generosity upholds everything on earth. So we hope, that the many gods of divisiveness and distortion, of pride and destruction, all the sad, broken pieces of the whole, find their way back together into a single vessel of life, that the world may be repaired. We hold on to this vision despite history, in the face of despair, because one day the whole world will acknowledge the divine unity. On that day, the world will be one, and the unity will be one. V'haya Adonai l'melech al kol haaretz, bayom hahu, yiyeh Adonai echad, u'shemo Please be seated. We affirm the holiness that courses through this world in life as well as in death by reciting Kaddish Yatom, the mourner's Kaddish. We just learned about the incredibly sad death of our patriarch, Steve Sussman, early on Shabbat morning. And funeral services will be Wednesday, with a Shiva Wednesday night and Thursday night. The holiday of Sukkot will end the Shiva, but I know that you will join me in sending to Sharon and to all of Steve's family your condolences. There'll be more to say. Steve, such a modest and gentle man, And I didn't know him for as long as many of you did, but a great blessing to know him. I invite the mourners among us who are remembering a yard site at this time to rise. In addition, I invite those who would rise in memory of those who die every day of war, of uncured disease, of hunger, of abuse, of poverty. In memory of the 200,000 Americans and many more worldwide we have lost to COVID-19. If it is your custom to rise with us, I invite you to do so. Page 29, Kaddish Yatom, the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru Amen.
Amen.
Yehei shmei rabbah mevarach le'olam u'lalmei almaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnasei v'yithadar v'yitalev v'yithalal shemei dekudisha barichu le'ela ul'ela kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechamata damiran bi'alma v'imru Amen.
Amen.
Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen.
Amen.
Oseh shalom bimromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru Amen.
Amen.
Zecher tzadik livracha, the memory of our righteous ones is always for a blessing. And we say Amen.
Amen.
We continue on page 26. One thing we ask of God, one thing we're seeking on this Kol Nidre, to be close to the source of life all the days of our lives, to dwell in God's kindness, and to see every space as the divine palace. Achat Sha'alti, top of 26.
Achat shati meit Adonai ota v'kesh. Achat shati meit Adonai ota v'kesh.
Shivti bebeit Adonai kol yemei chayai benoam Adonai ulvaker bechalo lachazot benoam Adonai ulvaker bechalo. We have announcements. It's Yom Kippur, tomorrow still. We'll start at 9 a.m. with some movement, 9:15 morning services, and then we'll continue through the day. There's a special, there's lots going on, but I believe it's at 3:30, regular folks doing right. There's 4 folks in the community who are going to talk about, and they're modest. I made them do this, so if you're wondering, people say, "Ooh, I'm a good person." I push them to do it, but it's going to be really special. 3:30, regular folks doing right. It's going to be Lauren Rosenzweig, Dennis Friedman, Sarah Coletti, and Eileen Myers. Good stuff. And then, of course, the rest of it. You should come to all of it. Next Friday, it's Sukkot. How about that? We've got a sukkah. There's guys from the Brotherhood who put up a sukkah, even when there weren't going to be that many people in it, which is incredibly kind of them. So thank the Brotherhood for all the stuff they do, including that. Next Saturday, Naomi Hope Cohen is called to the Torah as a bat mitzvah. That's going to be fantastic. She's sharp. All those Cohens, they know what they're doing. There's a lot of other stuff here. Bob Ferrara is working on a cleanup day on October 4th at 9:30. You need to sign up in advance, wear a mask. That's amazing, again, that people still work on the building when not a lot of people are seeing it. Racial Justice Committee, 3 workshops, October 13th, 27th, November 10th, 7 p.m. You don't have to be a racial justice scholar. You just have to be a person with a heart. All of our services were broadcast on CBE's Facebook page from Rosh Hashanah if you missed them. Thanks so much to Danny Martyr, who you can't see, there's a whole TV studio here. Danny Martyr found these amazing producers who are working with us, and he's been taken away from Erica and the kids, and he's been just putting in hours. Hours also went into this Machzor. There's so many people to thank, but Elaine Braun-Keller helped us make this thing, which is remarkable. Come see some solar panels if you want to ride by one of these days. We've got the biggest solar installation of any house of worship in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and it's live. We made it happen. So come see it. And there's a website. We'll talk about it another time, but you can see how many trees we're saving at this very moment. It's beautiful. The choir. Judy Kramer has helped us figure out a way to make our choir, which sounded great over there, right? Over there, see? Those empty chairs. Sounded great over there. Now it sounds great on a screen. And, that wasn't easy either. So we're going to finish with Adonai Li, God is with me. I'm really, really going to try hard to be not afraid. Adonai Li v'lo ira. And we're going to have the choir take us out. Gemar Chatima Tova. May we be sealed for a year of life and joy and sweetness.
משכיבנו